start this. Okay, for those of you watching the recording, welcome to a demonstrator meeting. And we are going to get into a mystery stamping project. And before I flip the camera to show the parts that we're going to use, I wanted to give credit to the lady who really inspired this. And when people say mystery stamping, I bet the first demonstrator that comes to mind is Sharon Armstrong, because she does so much. I don't know how she does it every week. It's crazy. And I was looking on her YouTube channel a little while ago, a couple of days ago, and I came across a really, really fun mystery stamping project. And I cased it. So Sharon, thank you. I did change 2 measurements. So I did change a little bit, but the design is hers, and it's really fun. And I think you're going to find that, Brenda, you're going to use up more designer series paper.
All right. Yay.
It's a really good one for that. So I'm going to flip this over, and you should be seeing the piece parts. And I'm just going to dive in. There are some pieces of paper. So when Sharon does her mystery stamping, before the mystery stamping event, she sends out an email and essentially says, here's the stuff you need to get together. So let's look at the stuff that I asked everybody or told everybody that you need to get together. And I'm going to kind of get this out of the way. This is a little less mystery stamping because I'm showing you what my pieces are. I'm starting with a piece of cardstock. This is crushed curry. It is 8.5 inches by 5.5 inches. And that's going to be the card base. We are going to do some scoring on that. So I'm just not going to do anything with it just yet. And then I also mentioned that you should have 3 pieces of designer series paper. I purposely cut these pieces from the same collection of designer series paper. And you can tell by the little pieces that are in here that I have used this a lot. It is called Daffodil Afternoon, and it is the freebie, one of the freebies, but it's a freebie in the celebration brochure, and the celebration ends at the end of February. I love, love, love this paper. It has a vintage look to me, and I don't know why, but it looks, I don't know, like it looks a little bit older, and it's not on white. It is on vanilla, very vanilla. So it gives it a little bit of a classic look. So you need 3 pieces of designer series paper. One of them, and the one that I'm holding up is the one that has the most design, at least for me. This one is 1 3/4 inches wide and 5 3/8 inches tall. And that is number 1. Number 2 and number 3 are the same size. They are both 2 1/4 inches wide. They are both 5 3/8 inch high. So if I put these 3 pieces side by side, they are all the same height. The 2 on the right have the same width, and this one is a little skinnier. So one more time, this one is 1 3/4 by 5 3/8. These 2, same dimension, 2 1/4 by 5 3/8. And what I kind of suggested in the instructions that I sent out was to maybe for the skinny one, have that one be the busiest for a pattern. And maybe for the other 2 to have at least one of them that wasn't super, super busy. And if you've got a pattern that needs to be vertical, that, you know, be aware when you're cutting it, you might want to consider the way that you cut. So those are the 3 pieces of designer series paper. Then I also suggested that for the inside of the card, that you have a piece of either white or very vanilla cardstock. And either way, this is cut to 4 1/8 inches wide and 5 3/8 inches high. So you get the theme. Everything is 5 3/8 inch high. And then we'll do the sentiment. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But these are really the primary pieces. And we're going to get going. So I do have a final card that is off to the side. I'm not going to show that to you just yet. But I'm going to bring in my scoring board. And I'm going to bring in the piece of cardstock. And I'm laying that so that it has the 8.5 inch on the scoring side. You're going to make 2 score lines with this. And I'm going to suggest one thing. I'm going to suggest that we make 1 score line, and then I'm going to flip the paper and I'm going to make the other score line, because we're going to end up scoring them in opposite directions. That'll make sense in a minute. So the first thing you're going to do is pretend this is a regular old A2 card, and you're going to score at 4 1/4 on the 8.5 inch side. So right straight down the middle. Just give it a nice score. And then I'm going to flip mine over. You don't have to do this. This is me, because I like to fold and burnish into the bump. And I'm going to be scoring this one the other way. The other score line is at 1 7/8 of an inch. So on my scoreboard, it's the tick mark to the left of the 2. So it's in between 1 3/4 and 2. So you're going to go at 1 7/8. And you're just going to give that a nice little burnish. And those are the only 2 score lines that you need to do. All right, so I'm going to now burnish this piece. And the first one that I'm going to do is not going to be the middle one. The first one I'm going to do is going to be the one that's at 1 7/8. And I like to fold so that the bump is on the inside. I find that the fiber in the paper breaks down better when you do that. And that's why I wanted to turn this over before I really give it a good score and a good burnish. So I'm folding this into a valley fold, and then I'm going to fold the other way. So I'm going to fold that into a mountain fold. I'm really making a Z fold card here with a twist. So this is what I'm ending up with. And because I did not score at 2 1/8, 2 1/8 would have been right in the middle of the half of the card. I've got a really cool kind of overlap of the cardstock behind that. All right, so that's where you should be. This is going to be the front of our card. Now, what I would suggest is that you grab one of the pieces of designer series paper that you cut that maybe isn't super, super busy. And I'm going to cheat. I'm going to not make this crazy because I want you to be able to make some decisions so you'll like the way that your papers are working together. You're going to put one piece, and this is one of the pieces that measures 2 1/4 by 5 3/8. That's going to get adhered right here. So if I hold this up, it's going to be sort of tucked behind that front fold. So kind of grab the papers that you're dealing with and figure out, and we're going to work on this one together, figure out how you might want to have the papers looking together. The next piece you want to grab is the one that you cut to, let's see, this one is 1 3/4 by 5 3/8. And it may be the one that has a little bit more of a design. That one is going to end up going on this front flap. So you can figure out what paper you want where. And then the other piece that you cut, which is the same size for me as the black piece that's shown down at the bottom, That's 2 1/4 by 5 3/8. And that one is going to go on the inside. So when you open up your card like this, you're going to have 2 pieces that are going to be showing next to each other. So take a couple of minutes or so and decide how you want to arrange these. You know, keep in mind, you really have options on each piece. You might want to change the side that you were planning on using and do something different. Maybe I want to put this piece on there and bring the other on the inside. It's completely up to you, obviously, but you do what you want and put those pieces down. And I'm going to start with the one that I'm going to put on the back of my front flap. And I'm just going to use liquid glue. And this is not mystical or magical or anything hard at all. And when we get this done, I think you'll agree, it's a very quick card. It's also a design that you are going to go and look at all those scraps of designer series paper that you have that you don't know what to do with, but you don't want to throw away just because you don't. And now you will have a use for them. And what I like to do is if I put this piece down first, so again, this is the one that is going to be behind that front fold. Now I have a visual cue of where to line up this piece. So this is going to go on that skinny in the front. And I can see if I want to try to get these about the same, I know where I need to put this on the top and on the bottom. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that on as well. What I also like about this is that you can choose any color cardstock that works. You could also make the base out of designer series paper if you wanted to. And by adding more designer series paper on the flaps, it will become stronger and it will definitely be self-supporting. So I'm just trying to line up the top and the bottom just so it looks a little intentional. And that's good enough. So I've got 2 of my pieces adhered, and I'm going to go and I'm going to put the one on in the middle. And now I've got another cheat because I can see where I put the top and the bottom on that little flap. And I'll go ahead and put that down. And I also like this because it's just a little different than a traditional Z-fold. You know, it has that really fun little kind of peak of the designer series paper underneath that front flap. So you get a little bit more color. And again, all I'm doing here is looking at where I put the top and bottom on the smaller piece and trying to get those as aligned as it will work. Good enough. Now, if you wanted to, you could glue this top flap down. I suggest you wait until we do a little bit more on this card before you decide if you want to do that. You could also maybe do a magnet if you wanted to. And you know, if you were going to do that, you would have tucked it underneath the designer series paper before we started. But I like being able to pull the card, and you'll see how we're going to do that in just a second. So that's really the beginning of the card itself. And it's just has those 3 pieces. If you wanted to add one more piece here, cut that the same as you did the piece for the front, which was 1 3/4 by 5 3/8. You can put another piece on the back if you want to. All right. Does anybody need us to hang on here for a minute before we continue?
I'm good.
Okay. So the next piece is whatever you chose for the inside of your card. And what I will suggest is that you do not adhere this yet. And for my card, it is a piece of very vanilla. Again, this is cut to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And I'm going to do a little stamping before I put it inside my card. And I want to let you know that when you do the stamping, I would suggest that you try to keep it so that it's kind of centered. You don't want to have any stamping. I'm looking at this piece of white because eventually it's going to go on the inside. If you're going to stamp anything on this, I suggest that I'm going to pull out the piece I'm going to end up putting on the front. So this is the piece I'm going to end up putting on the front. I don't want my stamping to show when I'm looking at the card. I want it to be hidden by the piece that I'm going to adhere to the front. When I sent out the directions, I said that you might want to have a piece of cardstock that is either the same color as your card base. In that case, this would have been crushed curry. Or if you wanted to use a color that would work well with your cardstock, you could use something else. And this is polished pink. So I also mentioned that you might want to start with a 3 by 3, and then you could pare it down if you wanted to. So you can have, a different size. This is not 3 by 3. I have chosen to bring it down to, for me, it's 2 5/8 by 1 5/8, because I wanted to have a little bit of a smaller piece on the front, but you can do whatever you want. My real message is you might want to consider what size you're going to put on the front. And this is going to be behind your sentiments. You're going to have one more piece. This is the piece I'm going to use for my sentiment. And I'm going to end up putting that right on the front of my card. I am going to do a little stamping on the inside piece, and I'm just going to make sure that that stamping is going to be tucked away, that you're not going to be able to see what that is. And I cheated with the magic of knowing what we were going to do. This is the stamp that I used. So I'm kind of dragging my feet here, so you have an opportunity to figure out if you want to stamp on this. And you can still later, use a block and go in and stamp it. You can also put this in a Stamparatus and stamp it later if you don't know exactly what you're going to stamp yet. But I am falling in love with this stamp set. I love it, love it, love it, love it. And I love the script. And one of the reasons I like the script so much is especially this happy birthday. It's not straight. So if it looks a little crooked, who cares? Because it doesn't look straight even when it's sort of straight, because the script is going up and down. And I just love that script. So anyway, tomorrow when we get together, this is I'm going to use this again on our Stamp Club project. But when you've decided what you're going to use for the inside of your card, and think about what you're going to use for the outside too. Again, you want to make sure that you're going to be able to hide that sentiment behind the piece that you're going to put on the front. When you're happy with that, go ahead and adhere the inside of your card down. And like I said, and we all know this, if you haven't decided what that's going to be at this point, no biggie. You can do it later, use an acrylic block, use Stamparatus, whatever, and you'll be able to get that sentiment inside your card.
Do you have to use that, or can you just stamp on the inside of your card?
You can just stamp, you can do whatever you want.
Okay.
And Belinda, if you're not going to do it yet, or if you haven't decided yet, my suggestion would be kind of hang out, and you can do this last. You don't have to do it right now. and it might help once we've done the front, and I'll show you an example. I didn't do stamping, but I did some more stuff on the inside that I hope is inspiring. We will see. Okay. Does anybody need for me to stop and pause here? If you do, just give me a thumbs up. Okay. So the next thing that I would suggest, and then we're going to get into kind of finishing off the card, is figure out what you want to use for the front. And this is the way the card will work. We're going to end up adhering part of that, the back of the sentiment, to the front flap. So the person who gets it is going to open it like this. So, you know, think about what size you want. If my piece were bigger, I could put it higher, I could put it lower, I could bring it further over. You know, there are a lot of different options on this as far as what you want to do. I decided to use a color different than the card base. Up to you. This would look really, really pretty in the crushed curry as well. The only reason I wanted to bring in the, what is it? Polished pink is I wanted to bring out a little bit more color in the designer series paper. And when you figured out what you want to do, this could be a die cut. You know, there's so many options, circles, triangles, whatever, a die cut. Figure out what you want to do for your sentiment and how you're going to kind of put that together. And this is, you know, it's wide open. And again, you don't have to do this at this point. It's kind of the next step, but if you want to do something a little bit different and figure out what you're going to use later, that's fine. So with the magic, since again, I knew what I was going to be showing you guys, I went ahead and stamped this sentiment. I hate to sound like a broken record, but I love the stamp set. And that sentiment, sending a card instead of a text, sings to me. It is just so appropriate, I think, for the world we live in right now. And I, just like the inside, I used Memento black ink, and I went ahead and I stamped that. I'm just gonna put these two together, but I could have cut different die shapes that work together well, or there are just too many possibilities. So you guys have been stamping for a long time, and you know how many different ways you could put something on the front of a card like this. And I'm just layering it together. You could also, and it would look really nice depending upon the designer series paper that you have, it would look really cool if you had a piece of designer series paper that you stamped on that worked with the designer series paper in your background. That would add just another layer of really, really pretty color. When you're at the point that you're ready to attach this, you're going to put some glue on one side. What I like to do, so I've got a visual of where I'm going to put the glue, I just like to put this piece, the piece that I'm going to be gluing, upside down about where I'm going to put it, so I know where I should and should not put glue, because obviously I don't want to glue the sentiment to the inside of the card. You don't need a lot of glue. And you can eyeball this. It really, really, really doesn't matter. So you'll probably see my head sticking in here. And I'm just kind of eyeballing to see if the distance from here and the distance from here is about the same. And then it's about straight. And then I'm just going to say we're good. And let it go. And then just push that down. And there's the working of the card. So when this card is popped in an envelope and the person on the other side gets it and opens it, obviously they would open it like that, and they would see a really fun message on the inside. Now, that's not the end, because now the fun part comes. And this is where I'm going to bring in the example that I did before we got together and show you a couple of ideas of maybe how to finish it off. So on this card, the only stamping is like I did on the other one, the sentiment on the inside, the sentiment on the outside. And then because I am obsessed with this paper, and because I do not want to waste an inch of it, which is crazy, while we were watching TV the other night, I got out my scissors and I took some of the pieces that I had cut that were not even really big, and I cut the flowers out. I know it's kind of nutty, but you know what? It was kind of fun. And there was just a little bit of fussy cutting involved. It wasn't super crazy. And I even, like, this was the edge of a piece, because you can see, let me put that up against here, you'll be able to see it better. That was the edge of a piece. So I had literally cut it right there. And I decided, well, maybe I could use partial pieces of the flowers. And that's what I did. For example, these were all on the cut. That's where I would have cut the paper. And when I cut them out, I purposely left the petals a little bit exposed so they look like they have dimension. They're not glued all the way down. And then I tucked that right in the bottom so that I've got an edge on each. This one was right on the side too. This one was as well. And this little guy also. And I just did some fussy cutting from that paper. And I did some more fussy cutting of these crazy little blue flowers and then layered them and thought that they were kind of fun because they really bring in the flower theme on that card. So if I did the same thing, and I haven't really played with this yet, there are a lot of things you can do. You know, obviously you can put the traditional bling of sequins and ribbons and twine and bling and grab the Wink of Stella and do some fun things with that. But you can also do some really cool things. Like I could stick this daffodil right here. I would probably want to, I don't know, maybe I don't want to cover up the fun little yellow that's on the edge of that flower because it's not quite the daffodil petal, but I can just stick that right down. And that won't be seen when the card is closed. I could put that really pretty flower right up at the top and kind of sneak it into the corner. I could even chop off the edges of those petals if I wanted to get it perfectly in the corner. And there are just so many possibilities that you can do with this. I think that looks a little silly because it's only a teeny bit of the daffodil. But I could bring this one in and stick that one right down in the corner as well. So it just adds a little bit of interest. And it was fun for me to go back and look at the designer series paper. And on this one, I might use that piece because it's big enough. I don't know if I'll use this one. So I may go in and just fussy cut out this daffodil, fussy cut out this really pretty daisy, Gerber daisy. We'll call it a Gerber daisy. I don't know exactly what it is. And then use that to layer on here and add some really fun interest. So that's the basic mystery card. This is the design that Sharon Armstrong shared. And the only two things that I changed from her design, I changed the size of the sentiment on the front, and I made the inside piece just a teeny bit wider so that it would fit nicely on the inside of the card. That's it. That's the mystery card. So I hope you guys liked it. I know it's super simple, but I thought it was just a fun little design. So that's it. I'm going to go ahead and stop this recording.